Welcome to the first tutorial video to orient you guys to PsychoPy. Today we're going to be building this recognition memory experiment. In this experiment, subjects are shown 6 words in a study phase. These words are shown in either green or blue. After studying these 6 words, subjects are presented with a screen telling them to get the researcher, and then there's a test phase where the 6 studied words are mixed in with 6 new words, and for each word, subjects have to decide whether they've seen it before or whether it's new, and they'll have to press a button to make that response. This is the experiment that we're going to build today, guys. Let's get to it. Alright, welcome to the first video to orient you guys on PsychoPy. PsychoPy is a very handy program to build experiments in, and today I'm going to be showing you some of the basics. So when you first open PsychoPy, you may come to this window. This is sort of the coding window. This isn't what you want though. So you want to go into View and click on Builder View. Sometimes PsychoPy opens up to this view, sometimes it doesn't, but that's how you get there. Okay, so now in Builder View, here's where we can actually build our experiment. PsychoPy is basically organized along a timeline here at the bottom. And as we add things to the timeline, this will grow and expand. Right now we've only got a single trial. So this is just a label. This just means that we're going to see something and we've called it trial. I'm actually just going to go ahead and if you right click on anything down here, you can remove or rename. I'm actually going to rename this, and I'm going to call this the welcome screen. So our experiment is going to start off with a welcome screen. After the welcome screen, where we'll have some instructions for participants, then we'll go on and we'll show them some items to study. Then we're going to have another instruction screen where we tell them to hold on, and we tell them that we're going to test their memory and how that's going to work. Then we'll have some test items that we're going to show people, and then we're going to have an end screen. So what we're building here today is a very basic recognition memory study. And it begins with a welcome screen. So this is the first item in our timeline. So how do you actually add stuff onto your welcome screen? Well, if you notice up here, there's this tab called Welcome Screen, and in it, it's totally blank. So let's do this. We want to display some text on our welcome screen, so let's click on the text item. These items to the right are different things that you can add. There's a few common ones that you're going to want to use, like text and keyboard and sometimes images, and then there's various other specialized responses that you can really explore on your own, and they may come up in very sort of fringe circumstances. Okay, so the first thing is we need a name for this text box that we're going to display on the screen. Don't just leave names as the default names because they're going to get really confusing really fast. So, you know, good programming convention, take a second to name things. So let's call this the welcome text. So text welcome. Now, we have some information about when we want this text item to appear. We can have it start at time 0, which basically means appear on the screen as soon as welcome appears on the screen. If we wanted, we could change this to 1 or 2, and that would mean that when the welcome screen down here starts, the program waits for 2 seconds before this particular text object appears. We're going to go ahead and set it to 0 because as soon as subjects are on the welcome screen, it's fine for them to see this text. Now for stop duration, how long do we want to show the text for? Right now it's set to 1 second. So if we ran this program, it would display the following text down here that says any text including line breaks. So it would just show that kind of nonsense phrase to subjects. It would appear for 1 second, then the entire experiment would end. Obviously we want the welcome text to hang on for a while, so we're actually going to delete this and leave this area blank. By leaving it blank, as you'll see here, blank is endless. So PsychoPy has a lot of sort of tips. So if you hover over things that you don't understand, it will often try and give you a bit more information so you know what these things are. So this text object is not going to have a stop time. And we'll see how to deal with that because otherwise the experiment would just linger on that forever. Now we have the color of the font. Of the text, we're going to leave that as white. We have the font style. You can use any font that you find in Microsoft Word, for example, like Comic Sans. Don't use Comic Sans, by the way. Arial is typically just fine. The height of the letter, you can adjust all these things to make things look a little different. Usually this stuff you leave more or less the same. Sometimes you mess with the color. The position, this is sometimes of use to you. 0, 0 means center the text in the middle of the screen. If you want to move text left or right, you can put in positive or negative values here. So I believe -1 will move the text to the left, +1 to the right. Don't quote me on that because I'm not going to change it here with you today. But same here. I think +1 moves the text up, -1 moves it down. And I believe you can use -2 and so on. You can go ahead and experiment with these numbers. You can put in fractions if you like. So if you do have text that you want to appear on different points of the screen, go ahead and experiment here, and that's how you do that. Here's the actual text that you have appear on the screen. So this is a welcome screen. So let's say something like, welcome to our experiment. Please have a seat and go over the instructions with the researcher. Now, obviously, we could type out all of our instructions here, or we could have a piece of paper printed out that have the instructions that we give to the subject, and we let them read, and on the computer we'll just say, please read the instructions. Either way, it doesn't matter. We're going to go this route today. We'll talk about these constant drop-down options a little later, but for right now, just leave everything as constant. If you go into advanced here, here's where you can mess with some other properties. So you could flip things. So if you want to have the text reversed or something, this is actually much more handy if you have images. You can flip them left or right or up or down. Opacity is whether something is transparent or opaque. So you can see again hovering over here. At 0, the item would be fully transparent, so you never want to go fully to 0, it wouldn't appear on the screen, but 0.5, you could make it sort of semi-transparent. We're not getting that fancy today. So you can go ahead and check out all those extra features if you like, but let's just go ahead and click OK. And what happens is now in our welcome screen object, we have a text object that is of infinite length. So this text object here, and you can click on the text object if you want to get back to its properties and edit it more. It has an infinite length. And that's good because we don't want subjects to be rushed reading this first screen. Okay, but if this welcome screen is going on infinitely, how do we actually end it? Well, the way we do that is by adding a keyboard control. So let's just click here. And now we have a keyboard response. Again, name your things so that later on when you're looking at your data file, you're not scratching your head trying to figure out what was key resp_2 representing again. So we can just call this key welcome, and then later on we'll know this is the welcome screen when somebody pressed a key. Start time 0, again, you could set it to 2 seconds or 3 seconds if you didn't want subjects to be able to press a key until 2 or 3 seconds into the screen. 0 is fine for us. Keyboard controls automatically have an infinite duration because pretty much as long as we're on the welcome screen, you're going to want to be taking possible inputs from people. Force end of routine. This is the thing that you want to leave checked because what this is going to do is force our welcome screen to end. So this is how we get out of our welcome screen. When this keyboard object gets an input, it's going to end the welcome screen and go on to the next point in the timeline. We haven't created it yet, but we'll have some study trials here. Now here, under allowed keys, this is where you tell the computer what keys subjects are allowed to press. So right now, if the subject pressed yes, no, left, right, or spacebar, the keyboard object here would take that as a key and it would end the trial. Obviously though, we don't want all these possibilities, not for just a welcome screen. We'll just erase everything and leave space. But you could add your own stuff in here, like you could add enter, or you could add A, or you could add 2, you could add whatever you want. But for our purposes, spacebar is the only key we're going to allow to be pressed. Here, under storing, you don't really have to mess with this. You can leave it as last key. This is just telling the keyboard object that whatever the last key the subject pressed, that's the one to store. And the way this is set up, when they press a key, the trial ends anyway, so it's all fine. And we're just going to leave the rest as is. Click OK. And now we have our welcome screen. Now, if we want to test this out, what should happen is we should come to the welcome screen, see text for an infinite duration, and until we press spacebar, nothing should happen. So let's go ahead and click run. This little run icon here is how we actually start an experiment. And if we haven't saved our file yet, it is going to ask us to save a file. So we're going to call this file just demo1 for our purposes, but on your computer, call it something else. Call it like recognition demo or something like that. Again, use descriptive labels for things, guys. It doesn't hurt, but it'll make it a lot easier when you're trying to figure out what your files are later on. Okay, now the computer is running. when you run a PsychoPy script, it asks you for a participant number and a session. You can leave participant blank, and we're going to do that for purposes of our testing, but when you're actually running subjects, you'll want to put in a unique number here. It doesn't matter what the number is, but basically these numbers help us keep our data separate. So participants 8 data is separate from participants 9 and participant 10 and so on. For today, we'll just leave it blank. And voila! Here's our text object that appears. So we're right now on the timeline. We're on the welcome screen. The welcome screen shows this for an infinite amount of time. It's waiting for a keyboard response. I'm pressing other buttons right now. Nothing is happening until I press spacebar, and now the experiment ends. Okay, so going back over to our window now. So the welcome screen works, but that's the only thing we have in our experiment, and we want more. So if we want to add something to the timeline, we can add either a routine or a loop. I'm first going to show you routines, and then we'll work loops in a moment. So let's add a routine. If we wanted, we could add another copy of the welcome screen. Now, the way the experiment will work, subjects will see the welcome screen, they'll press spacebar, they'll see the welcome screen again, they'll press spacebar, then they'll quit. Obviously, we don't want that, so we can go ahead and remove that. Let's instead insert a new routine. Now, we're being asked for the name of our routine. Again, use convenient naming conventions, clear naming conventions. So let's create a study trial, because after the welcome screen, we want subjects to study a list of words. Now we get an option. We can insert it here or here. That's the little ball that's moving along. Obviously, we want it to come after the welcome screen. And now if we notice up here, there's another tab. Before we just had the welcome screen, now we have the study trial. We can click to it up here, or if you're down here and you click on it, you'll move over to it. So wherever you click, as long as you're clicking on study trial, you'll get to it. Now we have this blank area, and again, just like with our welcome screen, we want to add things to this study trial object so that certain things appear on the screen. So let's do this. Let's add a text object, and we'll call this study item. Or actually, let's call it study word, because these are words. We'll have the word appear on the screen for 2 seconds, and under text, I'm just going to put study word goes here for just a moment. And if you click on OK, because the rest is all just fine, then now we have our study trial, and it will show our phrase, study word goes here. It will show that for 2 seconds, and then the experiment will end. Now, obviously, however, we don't just want this study trial to appear once, we want it to appear a number of times. In this example, we're going to have 5 study trials and 10 test trials. So how do we make this part of the experiment loop? Well, you guessed it, by inserting a loop. When you click to insert a loop, you're asked to pick a start and an end point. So just like when we're selecting where to place our trial, here we're selecting where to start the loop and where to end it. I'm going to start the loop right here, and I'm going to end it right here. And I get some options. Let me come back to this in a moment. If you see what happened to my study trial, now all of a sudden we see a loop that's indicated on the timeline here. So study trial is a single object that's going to show a single study word, but it's going to loop some number of times. Great, so let's go into our loop properties by clicking on trials here. So let's rename this to be our study trials. And here are the other loop properties that you've got. So loop type basically identifies how we want to select our items. I'm going to kind of skip some of this stuff for a moment because we're going to have to look at how you feed in individual study items. But for right now, this loop is going to repeat 5 times. So we're going to see 5 study trials. And again, right now the study trial just says study word goes here, but we're going to see that 5 times. Okay, so the study trial is 2 seconds. We're going to see 5 of them. We have our welcome screen. What happens if we go to run our experiment now? So we're asked again about participant. We'll leave that as blank. And voila. Okay, here's our welcome screen. We press spacebar to go past. Study word goes here. Should appear for only 2 seconds. And then we should go on to the next study word goes here and the next one. As you notice, though, it kind of feels like the study word goes here item was just lasting for 10 seconds. It didn't feel like there was any separation between one presentation and another. So here's where we bring in an interstimulus interval. I want to show a study word for 2 seconds, and then I want to have a brief gap so that subjects feel like that item is over and the next one has begun. The simplest way to do this, I mean, there's a few ways you could do it. We're going to insert a new routine, and we're going to call this blank 500, which basically means it's going to be a blank screen for 500 milliseconds. And I'm going to go in, I can insert this anywhere I want in the timeline, but I want to insert it right here, right after the study trial. So the study trial appears for 2 seconds, and then afterwards we want to have a blank that lasts for 500 milliseconds, so half a second. An easy way to do that is to insert a text object. We'll call it blank 500. It will last for half a second, or 500 milliseconds, and it will have absolutely no text. If you click on OK, now if we run our experiment, what you find is that after 2 seconds, the trial ends and we go on to the next one. So these interstimulus intervals are actually important to psychologically help people notice that items have changed. Now, it's impossible to notice that items have changed in this case because on every study trial it just says study word goes here, but it's still important to include. So think about these minor things when you're developing your experiment. We can get even more particular than this and say after the welcome screen, rather than going right into a stimulus, why don't we have another blank right here? So by creating the blank as a routine, we can easily insert blanks wherever we need them in the experiment. It's actually pretty convenient, so I recommend doing it that way. So people see the welcome screen, then there's a blank for half a second, and then things begin. Okay, how do we actually get different items on this study trial though? Because look, study word goes here is not going to work for us. We want different words. Well, the way we do this is by creating a word list in Excel. So to create a stimulus file that PsychoPy can read, we just need to set up an Excel sheet in a very simple way. So let's call this word item. So in Excel, you create a heading, and that is your first row. For us, it's going to be a very simple file because we're only going to have words. And maybe actually, let's have some of the words appear in one color and some appear in another. So we're going to have another variable called word color. So this is the basic setup that we're going to use, and we're going to get multiple words shown in our experiment. So now we need a couple words. So here are just a couple words I jotted down off the top of my head. So these are going to be our words that people are going to study. Let's have half of them appear in green, and we'll have half appear in blue. And there we go. So let's go ahead and save this, and we'll call this our stimulus file. We'll call this our word stimuli. Great. All right, so how do we get this into PsychoPy, and how do we actually get the study items to appear properly? Well, let's go back to our experiment over here. So if we click in Study Trials, here we have the option to set our conditions. And if you hover over this, it says name a file specifying the parameters for each condition, a CSV or Excel file. So if we click Browse, we can click on our word stimulus file and click Open and look at what it's discovered. It says that we have 6 conditions with 2 parameters, and it's identified word color and word item as parameters. If we look back at our Excel file, we had 2 parameters and we had 6. It's calling these conditions, but we'll call them 6 stimuli. And so PsychoPy is detecting that we have 6 items to load. This is great. Now, what we want is for PsychoPy to go through this entire list once. So we're actually going to set number of repetitions to be 1. If we set it to be 2, then it would go through this entire list twice. So we would actually get 12 items shown in this study phase. But we only want to see each item once. So number of repetitions is once. The only other option you might want to mess with is sequential or random. Sequential, how this would work is PsychoPy would go through our different study items and it would select friend, then phone, then mountain, then valley, then glass, then wrench. We don't want that. We'd like to see our study items in a random order. So maybe phone will appear first, then glass, then valley, then friend, then wrench, then mountain. So selecting random will keep things random. So we'll go ahead and click OK. Now the loop here is loading in our items, but we still need to tell the study trial to actually show the correct words. Because if we go into our study word text object, we're still just showing the phrase study word goes here. So we don't want that. What we'd like to do is show word item. So what we want is to see friend, phone, mountain, glass, valley, wrench. The way we do this is actually by just typing in the label for our header, so word item, but adding a $ before it, and by switching this from constant to set every repeat. What constant means is that the text box is going to be set once and it's going to have a value for the entire experiment. We don't want that. We want this study text word object to update every single time our loop repeats. So rather than leave this as constant, which would just end up showing $ word item to the subject, if we set it to set every repeat, what we're saying is every time the loop goes around and picks another item, update this right here. And so by doing this, we're going to see the words friend, phone, mountain, valley, glass, wrench in some random order. Now the other thing that we can assign here is color. So rather than leaving all the words white, how about they change their color based on the colors we've assigned here. So friend will always appear in green, phone will always appear in green, mountain in green, valley in blue, glass in blue, and wrench in blue. Again, remember to change constant to set every repeat. And if you do that, and now we run our experiment, what you'll see is that now we're actually seeing study words, and we're seeing them presented in different colors. So phone is in green, mountain is in green, wrench is in blue, and so on. So now you're starting to see the basic building blocks you can use to have different items presented in PsychoPy here. Now, if you're curious how to get PsychoPy to randomly assign one of these colors to one of these items, or if you're curious about how to get images instead of words, look to one of my later videos. But we're just going to finish off the remainder of today by filling out this experiment here. So with what I've shown you already today, things are starting to look pretty much like they're finished. We need to add another screen here, another instruction screen to say, now the study phase is finished, please talk to the researcher about the test phase. Then we need to add a loop for test trials, and then we need to add an end screen. So I'm going to go ahead and add all that in right now. So first we need a wait screen, we'll call it. We'll insert that here. Next, if we go on our wait screen, we can add in a text object, and we'll call this text wait, and we'll say, please get the researcher. We'll keep this very simple and brief, infinite duration. Click OK. We need to add a keyboard object or people will be stuck there forever. A handy thing to do in the middle of an experiment, if you put space as the key that will allow subjects to carry on to the next part of the experiment, sometimes subjects will just press that and they won't actually come get you. So a little trick I like to use is to pick some random letter like I or K that subjects wouldn't think to press so that they can't move forward in the experiment until they come and get you. We'll call this the wait key. Remember to be labeling things as you go so that things are very easy later on when you want to see what you have done. We're going to go ahead and insert a new routine. We'll call this the test trial. We're going to insert it after the wait screen. We can go ahead and insert our loop around the test trial before we even make it, because that's pretty easy to do. These will be the test trials. We know we're only going to want one repetition. We'll set up the conditions in just a moment. We know after the test trial that we want to have a blank. So again, make sure you have these interstimulus intervals, these blanks between trials, between segments of your experiment. It helps keep things psychologically distinct for subjects, reduces confusion. Let's just go ahead and add an end screen as well. End screen. We will add it over here. And in our end screen, just like with the wait screen, it's very simple. Text end, infinite, and we'll say thanks for participating. Please see the researcher. Now, here's one other tip when it comes to PsychoPy. For the end screen, it's actually sometimes helpful to just set it on a timer. So 20 seconds is plenty. Here's one thing about PsychoPy. If you add in a keyboard command to the end screen, and for some subjects you press that keyboard command, and for other subjects you press escape, so escape will exit any PsychoPy experiment that's running, then the data files actually come out slightly different with their columns not perfectly aligned. So what you want is for every subject to end the experiment in the same way. A guaranteed way to do that is just have the end screen on a timer. It times out after 20 seconds. There is no escape to press. Never press escape to exit a subject, and you'll just ensure the data files are all compatible and there's no problems. Okay, the very last thing is the test trial. We need to add in our test word, and our test word is going to appear forever this time, not for 2 seconds, but forever. And we'll leave this as test word goes here for a moment. So in a recognition memory test, after you've studied a series of items, so let's say you study 6 items, during the test phase we might show you 12 items and ask you to pick out which ones you saw before and which ones are new. So sometimes this is called yes-no recognition, so you say yes to the items you saw before and no to the new items. You could call it old-new. It doesn't really matter what keyboard responses we have here, since this is just a very simple demo, but we're just going to keep yes and no. So in this experiment, we can imagine we're telling subjects to say yes to any study word they recognize and no to any new word. And we'll call this the test response, and we'll just leave it at that. Now, if we did just go in and select the same conditions file for the test phase as we did for the study phase, what would happen is in the test phase you would only see 6 items that you had seen before. So you would just be able to say yes to everything. So we need some way of presenting more items at test than we did at study. What you could do is you could go in and make up some new items, like land, globe, hammer, pet, wire, street. They don't need a word color, because let's imagine that words are only being given a color at study, so these new items here, none of these need a color. You could save this as another file. You could call this word stimuli 2 or word stimuli test. And then over in the PsychoPy, you could actually load up a different Excel file for the test phase and the study phase. But there's actually a better way to do this. So for this word stimulus file, we have 6 items that we want subjects to study, and subjects will study those in green or blue. Then we have 12 items that we want people to see at test. We're going to show every word at test in white, so we don't need to give these items a color. So how could we use a single file to run our entire experiment? It's good to have a single file because let's say that later on we change this to telephone, and we only change it in the test file, but we forget to go back and change it in the study file. Well, if you have 2 files, those kinds of mistakes can occur. But if you have only a single file, then we've changed telephone in the test file here, it will automatically be changed for the study phase too. So we want the study phase and the test phase to use the same file. So here's one way that we can do it. Go into your PsychoPy, and for the test phase, select that stimulus file as well. And you'll see it's now detecting that there are 12 conditions. There's 12 items, and that's good. It's detecting 2 variables, only one of which we care about in the test phase. So let's just say, okay, our test phase is going to be good. We go back in here, and for test word, we go with word item, that variable name again. Remember to change it to set every repeat. We don't want it to be constant. We want this value to change every time the loop updates, and we just say okay. Well, now things are great. And if we go to run our experiment, we're going to have, everything's going to run except for the test. At the study phase, we're going to see these 6 extra items. And we don't want that. So what we want is a way to tell the study phase only select these 6, the first 6 items. The way we do that is by going into its loop and changing selected rows. So if you hover over it, it says select just a subset of rows from your condition file. So if we want our first 6 rows, we want items 0 through 5. Notice what it says when we hover over. It says the first item is 0, not 1. That means that friend is item 0, telephone is item 1, mountain is 2, valley is 3, glass is 4, wrench is 5. So if we type in 0:5 and click OK, actually small edit here guys, put 0:6. In the remainder of this video, I'm going to have 0:5, but if you pay attention during my study phases, they're only 5 items long. They're actually missing that 6th item. So again, you want to have 0:6 here. You want the first 5 items. So you count up 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you add one more to make the end point. So it's 0:6. In my next video, this will be corrected, but by the time I made this video, I did not realize that I had made this mistake. Then now our study items will only pick from the first 6, our test items will pick from all 12, and we've basically created our first recognition memory experiment. So let's go ahead and give this a run and see what happens. Oh, and actually it's good that this came up. Occasionally PsychoPy will give you this error about you, apostrophe, and a problem. This is a weird bug that you'll occasionally see. The solution is basically to surround 0 and 5 in single quotes. Sometimes it needs it, sometimes it doesn't. To this day, I can't tell you exactly when it will or will not need it. Now, if it did, if PsychoPy let you click OK, then everything would be fine. But unfortunately, it doesn't. And so the simplest solution here is we're going to create another loop that will replace this one, and we'll have all the same information, except it will have 0:5 in single quotes here. So let's just go ahead and do that real quick. Click on Insert Loop. I'm just going to surround the previous one in case I need to look at it for some reason. But I remember what was there, so I don't need to. Go ahead and select all of our items. Voila. And now what I'll do, so we can check the old loop to make sure that everything matches up with the new loop. So there's the old one. Here's the new one. Everything looks the same. I'm going to go ahead and remove the old one. I'm just going to take the 2 off the new one. So if you ever encounter that weird bug, that's how you fix it. Everything should run now, and lo and behold, it does. We click Go Ahead. Welcome to our experiment. Here are our 6 study words, so we shouldn't see any of the new words. And phone should appear as telephone because we updated that. So there it is, going through our different items. Please get the researcher. Spacebar no longer works. I think I was the key I selected. Yep. And now for each item, we just have to identify whether this is an old or a new item by pressing yes or no. So you can sort of quiz your memory here if you like. It's not really necessary. Escape will quit us out of the experiment. Or if we carry on and get to the end, then we'll be presented with a thanks screen, and this will stay on the screen for 20 seconds. So there you have it, a crash course in your first recognition memory experiment in PsychoPy. The basics that I've shown you here today, you can use to build far more sophisticated experiments. There's a few more advanced techniques that you'll see in the later videos, but go ahead and try and build this experiment from the ground up. With me in this video or on your own. Experiment, play around by changing things, see what happens. Just get comfortable, but ultimately PsychoPy is a very intuitive interface, I believe. So good luck getting started with PsychoPy, and if you check out some of the other videos, we'll see you there.